At 53, my life was a carefully curated gallery of moments, each one framed, polished, and predictable. My husband, Paul, and I had settled into a rhythm in our suburban home, with its manicured lawn and walls lined with photos of a life well lived. He was a good man, steady, always there with a kind word or a plan for our next vacation. But somewhere along the way the colors of our days had faded, the edges softened by routine. I wasn't miserable, not exactly. I had my garden, my book club, my long walks with my best friend Lisa. But there was a restlessness in me, a hunger for something more, something I couldn't name. That was before her son, Nathan, walked into my life and set it ablaze. Nathan was 25, Lisa's pride and joy, a young man with a sculptor's cheekbones and eyes that seemed to see through the world's facade. I'd known him since he was a boy, all gangly limbs and endless questions, but time had transformed him into something else, confident, magnetic, with a quiet intensity that made you lean in. He'd moved back to town after a breakup, crashing at Lisa's place while he figured out his next move. I'd see him at her house sometimes, lounging on the couch or helping with dishes, and I'd catch myself noticing him. The way his shirt clung to his shoulders, the way his laugh filled the room. I brushed it off as harmless, a middle-aged woman's fleeting fancy. But deep down, I knew it was more. It was a rainy October evening when things shifted. Lisa was out of town for a work trip and Paul was at a late meeting, leaving me alone with the hum of the house and a bottle of Merlot. I was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, when the doorbell rang. Nathan stood on the porch, soaked from the rain, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. Mom locked herself out of her email, he said, holding up his phone with a sheepish grin. She said you know the password. I laughed, stepping aside to let him in, and that's when it started, the moment that changed everything. He followed me to the living room, dripping water on the hardwood, and we sat on the couch, scrolling through my laptop to reset Lisa's account. The task was simple, but Nathan lingered, his knee brushing mine as he leaned closer to the screen. The air felt heavier, charged with something unspoken. We started talking about his breakup, his dreams of starting a business, the way life never quite matches your plans. His voice was low, intimate, and his eyes kept finding mine, holding them a little too long. I felt a flush creep up my neck, a warmth that had nothing to do with the wine. You're different, he said suddenly, setting the laptop aside. I froze, my glass halfway to my lips. Different how? I asked, trying to sound casual, but my heart was pounding. He leaned back, studying me like I was a puzzle he wanted to solve. You're alive, he said, his words slow, deliberate. Not just going through the motions. I see it, even if you don't. My breath caught, his words slicing through the haze of my routine. I should have changed the subject, sent him home, but I didn't. I let the moment stretch, let his gaze pull me in, let the silence grow heavy with possibility. The rain was louder now, a steady drum against the windows, and the room felt too small, too warm. Nathan shifted closer, his hand resting on the couch, inches from mine. You've lived so much, he said, his voice softer, almost a whisper. I want to know what that feels like. My pulse raced, a warning bell ringing in my head, but my body was traitorous, leaning toward him, drawn to his heat. His fingers brushed mine, a fleeting touch that sent a jolt through me, and I didn't pull away. Nathan, I started, my voice trembling, but the words dissolved as he leaned in, his lips finding mine. The kiss was a spark, igniting something I'd buried long ago. It was urgent, reckless, a collision of need and forbidden desire. My hands found his damp hair, pulling him closer, and for a moment I was lost in the rush, the taste of rain on his lips, the press of his body, the thrill of being wanted so fiercely. But then reality slammed into me like a cold wave. This was Nathan, Lisa's son, in my home, my sanctuary. I pushed him back, my breath ragged, my lips tingling with the ghost of his kiss. We can't, I gasped, standing, putting distance between us. His eyes were dark, searching, but he didn't move. No one has to know, he said, his voice calm, almost pleading. Just us. Just this. I turned away, gripping the back of a chair to steady myself. My mind was a storm, guilt, fear, and that traitorous spark of want. What if Lisa found out? What if Paul came home early? The life I'd built, the friendships I cherished, felt like they were crumbling under the weight of that one moment. Nathan watched me silent, his presence a reminder of what I'd done, what I'd wanted. Please, I said, my voice breaking, don't tell anyone. This didn't happen. He nodded, but there was something in his expression, something that made my stomach twist. I didn't trust him to stay silent. I didn't trust myself to forget. He left soon after, the rain still falling, leaving me alone with the half-empty wine bottle and the echo of our kiss. The secret we'd created was a living thing, pulsing in the silence, and I knew it would haunt me. I'd offered Nathan a taste of experience, but what had I taken in return? And how much would it cost me to keep it hidden? The living room was a minefield after that rainy night. Every glance at the couch, every creak of the floorboards, brought back the memory of Nathan's kiss, the heat of his lips, the reckless surge of desire that had consumed me. I was 53, a wife, a friend, a woman who'd always prided herself on loyalty, but that moment had cracked something fundamental in me. The guilt was a constant ache, gnawing at my insides, but worse was the other feeling, the one I couldn't confess even to myself. I wanted it to happen again. And that truth was a shadow I couldn't outrun. Paul came home the next morning, his briefcase thudding onto the counter as he rambled about his meeting. I played my part, smiling, asking about his day, but my hands trembled as I poured his coffee, my mind replaying every second of Nathan's touch. Lisa's call later that day was even harder. "You're a saint for helping Nathan with his mom's email," she said, her voice bright with gratitude. Each word was a stab, a reminder of the betrayal I'd committed under her trust. I told myself it was over, a one-time mistake I could bury. I'd avoid Nathan, keep my distance, and protect the life I'd built. But Nathan wasn't someone you could easily ignore. He showed up 2 days later, unannounced, on a crisp October afternoon. Paul was at work and I was in the backyard raking leaves to keep my hands busy when I heard the gate creak. Nathan stood there, his jacket slung over one shoulder, his dark eyes catching the sunlight. "Thought I'd check in," he said, his tone casual but his gaze anything but. My stomach twisted, a mix of dread and that traitorous spark I couldn't extinguish. "You shouldn't be here," I said, gripping the rake tighter, but my voice was too soft, too unsteady. He stepped closer, the crunch of leaves under his boots loud in the quiet yard. We talked, or at least we tried to. The weather, Lisa's trip, anything to avoid the truth. But the words felt hollow, and the space between us was alive, humming with tension. He reached out, brushing a leaf from my hair, and his fingers lingered, grazing my cheek. The touch was electric, a reminder of everything I was trying to forget. "I haven't stopped thinking about you," he said, his voice low, almost a confession. I wanted to step back, to tell him to leave, but my feet were rooted, my body betraying me with every heartbeat. "Nathan, we can't," I said, but the words lacked conviction, and he heard it. The backyard faded, the rustling trees, the distant hum of a lawnmower, the world beyond the fence. He closed the distance, his hand sliding to my waist, pulling me closer. "Tell me you don't feel it," he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. I opened my mouth to lie, to say I didn't, but the truth was louder, pulsing through me. I leaned into him, and when his lips found mine, it wasn't a kiss, it was a surrender. We moved to the garden shed, a shadowed corner where the world couldn't reach us, and there, surrounded by the scent of earth and wood, we crossed a line far beyond that first kiss. Every touch, every whispered word, was a step deeper into the abyss, and I let myself fall, consumed by the heat of him, the freedom of being wanted so fiercely. When it was over, reality hit like a tidal wave. I pulled away, my breath ragged, my clothes disheveled, the weight of what we'd done crushing me. Lisa could call at any moment. Paul could come home early. This wasn't just a secret anymore. It was a betrayal that could destroy everything. "This has to stop," I said, my voice trembling as I straightened my sweater. Nathan's eyes were dark, unreadable, but he nodded. "It's our secret," he said, his tone calm, almost too calm. "No one will know." But his words didn't reassure me. They felt like a chain binding me to him, to this moment, to the lie I'd have to live. I stumbled out of the shed, the cool air a shock against my flushed skin. Nathan, friend's son, Nathan was gone, leaving only the echo of our kiss and the weight of our secret. I stood in the backyard, my heart pounding, the rake still in my hand, and tried to steady myself. The leaves were scattered, a silent witness to what we'd done, and I knew I couldn't undo it. I was spiraling, caught between the guilt and the memory of his touch, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lisa. "Nathan says you've been a huge help. Dinner soon." My heart stopped. The words were innocent, but they felt like a spotlight, exposing me. And then as I stared at the screen, another message came through, this time. "From Nathan, I need to see you again. Tonight." My blood ran cold. What did he mean? Was he going to tell someone? Or was this something else, something even more dangerous? The secret was growing and I had no idea how to contain it. Nathan's text, "I need to see you again tonight," was a blade, sharp and unrelenting, cutting through the fragile walls I tried to rebuild. It sat in my phone, unanswered, as I stood in the backyard, the rake still in my hand, the shed's door still ajar like a silent accusation. I was 53, a woman who'd always known right from wrong, but I'd let myself fall into something so dangerous, so forbidden, that it was unraveling everything. The guilt was a living thing, clawing at me, but worse was the pull of Nathan's words, the way they stirred that reckless part of me I couldn't silence. I was drowning and I didn't know how to stop. I didn't respond to the text, hoping silence would end it, but the hours ticked by, each one heavier than the last. Paul came home, his usual warmth tempered by exhaustion, and I avoided his eyes, terrified he'd see the truth written on my face. Lisa's message about dinner lingered in my mind, her trust a weight I couldn't bear. I wanted to run, to erase the last few days, but Nathan's presence was everywhere, in the leaves scattered across the yard, in the quiet hum of the house, in the way my skin still tingled from his touch. By evening, I knew I couldn't avoid him. I had to face this to end it before it destroyed me. I drove to the address he'd sent, a quiet cafe on the edge of town, its windows glowing softly in the October dusk. My hands shook as I parked, my heart pounding with a mix of dread and that shameful spark I couldn't extinguish. Nathan was at a corner table, his dark eyes finding mine the moment I walked in. He looked calm, almost too calm, but there was an intensity in his gaze that made my stomach twist. "You came," he said, his voice low, like we were already sharing a secret. I sat across from him, keeping the table between us, a flimsy barrier against the pull of his presence. "What do you want, Nathan?" I asked, my tone sharp, but my resolve was already crumbling. He leaned forward, his hands clasped, his voice steady but urgent. "I can't let this go," he said, and my heart sank. "What we have, it's real. I know you feel it too." His words were a mirror reflecting the truth I'd been fighting. I did feel it, the rush, the heat, the way he made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. But it was wrong, a betrayal of Lisa, of Paul, of everything I'd built. "You're her son," I said, my voice trembling. "This can't happen. It's over." But Nathan didn't back down. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine, and the touch was electric, a reminder of the shed, of everything I'd let happen. "No one has to know," he said, his voice soft but insistent. "We can keep this between us." The cafe faded, the clink of dishes, the murmur of other voices, until it was just us, caught in a moment that felt both inevitable and impossible. I pulled my hand away, my chest heaving, but my body was traitorous, aching for him even as my mind screamed to stop. "You don't understand," I said, my voice breaking. "This will ruin everything. Lisa, Paul, they'll never forgive me." Nathan's expression shifted, a flicker of something darker crossing his face. "What if Lisa already knows?" he said, his tone calm but laced with a challenge. I froze, my blood turning to ice. "What are you talking about?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. He leaned back, his eyes never leaving mine. "She called me today," he said. "Asked why I've been spending so much time with you. Said you've been acting strange." The world tilted, my breath catching as his words sank in. Had Lisa sensed something? Had I been too obvious, too distant? Or was Nathan manipulating me, using her to keep me close? I couldn't tell, and the uncertainty was a knife in my chest. "You're lying," I said, but my voice was weak, desperate. He didn't flinch. "Am I?" he asked, and the question hung between us, heavy and accusing. I left the cafe in a daze, my mind a storm of panic and dread. I drove home, checking my phone obsessively, expecting a call from Lisa, a confrontation, but there was nothing, just silence, heavier than ever. That night, Paul was quiet, his usual chatter replaced by a distracted air, and I wondered if he'd noticed something too. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, the weight of the secret crushing me. And then, the next morning, it all came crashing down. Lisa came over, unannounced, her face pale, her eyes searching mine. "We need to talk," she said, and my heart stopped. She'd found a note in Nathan's jacket, a draft of a message he'd written to me, never sent, but explicit enough to reveal everything. The confrontation was a blur of tears and accusations. Lisa's voice broke as she asked how I could betray her son, her trust. I tried to explain, to beg for forgiveness, but the words were ash in my mouth. Paul walked in halfway through, his confusion turning to devastation as Lisa told him everything. The room spun, my world collapsing under the weight of my choices. Nathan was gone by the next day, leaving town without a word, his absence a final twist of the knife. Lisa cut me out of her life, her silence louder than any scream. Paul and I tried to salvage our marriage, but the trust was shattered, and we separated months later. The house sold, my life reduced to fragments. I'd offered Nathan a taste of experience, but he'd taken more than I could give. The secret had cost me my best friend, my husband, my sense of self. And now, alone in the quiet, I'm left with the echo of that choice, wondering if I'll ever find my way back to the woman I was, or if she was ever real at all.